Now let's talk about note-taking and how to make it the most effective. So, number one, you got to keep it organized, that's for sure. Make sure all of your notes for each course have their own home. When I was a student, yes, here at UT Tyler, I had the terrible habit of buying a giant, like 5-subject notebook. I was like, hey, 5 subjects, taken 5 classes, this is great. And then I would not use each section of the notebook as a different class. I would just use the next page every time I went to a new class. And that was really stupid. And I lost a lot of valuable and important information. And I also didn't have the individual pockets for each course to put handouts in. And I literally set myself up for a huge mess. So don't do what I did, and make sure all of your notes for class, if they're physical especially, have their own home so they don't get lost. If you're using a digital component on a device or a laptop or something, it's a lot easier to keep things in their rightful homes and folders because you just save it right in the get-go. But hey, take it from someone who knows. Next, make sure you use space meaningfully. Keep the page neat, clean, and tidy, particularly when you are handwriting, whether that's on paper or on a tablet. Is making sure that your page itself is organized, not just the collection of notes is organized, is really important for you to be able to go back and review what you've written and still make those same connections you did the day you wrote it. And then use consistent abbreviations and or shorthand. Shorthand is a dying art, that's definitely true, but everybody has their own little weird abbreviations and shorthands that we use just for our own use. But the problem is sometimes those are not very standardized, and you may not know what you meant going back later. So if you're going to write something down very quickly and you're going to think, oh, I'll know what that means. No, you won't. Just assume you won't and write it out, or write it out at least a little bit longer than you did. Future you will be very grateful. So when you're taking notes, what should you write? Firstly, before you write anything, turn off autopilot, because if you just take notes for the sake of it, you're not going to write down anything important, and you're going to go back to your notes when it's time to study, and you're going to be like, wow, this is useless. So whether you are listening or reading, do so actively, and keep in mind how you will use these notes later, because if you know how you're going to use them, you will know what you need to write. So clearly write down all vocabulary, broad concepts, headings, and what's on a slideshow, obviously, but then write down quotes and added information from the lecture in the same organized sequence as the slides. But don't just write down vocab, broad concepts, headings, and what's on the slideshow. Write down any connections and ideas that you have while reading or rereading or listening to the lecture or re-listening to a lecture, all the while keeping your end of term essay and project topics in mind. And keep up with questions. Write down questions you have about the material, as well as any questions any of your peers might have, whether that's in a discussion post or in a physical classroom. Because, hey, if there's questions about it, it's probably going to come up on the test. And so taking notes, pro tips: save your time and hassles for later, and always cite your sources in your notes, always numbering your pages as well. So if you're in a word processing app, just, click in your header, add the page numbers. If you're handwriting and it's not in a bound spiral, write your page numbers, because when you drop those suckers, they're going to go everywhere and you need to know what you have. And this doesn't have to be in proper reference styles when you're citing in your notes only, though it does help you if you do. Just make sure you do write down all the information you will need in your notes to then later cite it accordingly for the bigger project or paper. Especially, hey, if you're learning a new reference style, maybe go ahead and do it the hard and long way in your notes just to get practice doing it. But hey, so if you need to know, man, this was a great idea and I want to use it in my paper, but you didn't write if it came from the book, yourself, your professor, or another classmate, you have to err on the side of not using it because you can't plagiarize. So write your cites down first. And then good note-taking will always improve your active listening, comprehension of material, and retention of that information. because you're involving more senses in your processing. So it's pretty easy. A multitude of studies have shown and continue to show that taking notes by hand, like not typing, but writing physically, is the best for retention of information in your brain, and especially your ability to recall it later. However, that does not mean you shouldn't type them up later, because that is just an added layer of processing. This allows you to access all your notes at all times, and pro tip, makes it searchable. So if you're looking for something in particular, this is really helpful and you don't have to just flip back and forth. So finally, make it fun. Just don't get caught up in making them too pretty. A great study method is to rewrite your notes into a study guide. Making it aesthetically pleasing makes it fun. So whether you're making little charts or graphs or whatever, or you just have nicely like demarcated areas that certain information goes in, it makes you reread important info and reorganize it to show those relationships between categories of information. Plus, integrating visual aids and spatial organization always helps your brain make, retain, and recall patterns that you learn. So it's a fun way to keep studying, and it's a really fun thing to do in group work or just when you have study buddies. So happy note taking!